All right, old Uncle 2 back with you once again. All right, let's get into it for another weekly outlook. This week, we're going to hit the primaries like we always do, Bitcoin and ES. We're going to start with the ES, and we're also going to have our bonus charts of the week as Ripple, XRP, and Copper. Just a little discussion on those. Okay. So on the ES last week, I left you off on we were starting to decline out of this three-wave high, and I had told you that it seemed very likely that that was a C to the downside with potential upside thereafter. We didn't get too much into the context, although there was a decent chance that that would have turned into 1 to 1 2 up for a 3 or a C, 3 relative to this, potentially still with C within that. However, that did not evolve. What happened was that we actually put in what I would say is a small C wave to the upside, which is setting this whole pattern up very nicely to still be a three-wave sideways consolidation. And this is a nice little bottoming area again, where you can take advantage this week. Last week, you would have been able to take advantage to this high. This week, I think we can take another potential swing at a move to the upside. And of course, we'll remember that once you lock in a good position at the low, you're going to want to go ahead and lock that in. Don't give it back when something like this happens. We're talking about a week by week movements in these videos. All right, so this is going to be a little bit broader of a picture now, so we can fully expect that if we do get in at the bottom of this low that I'm about to show as a potential, that maybe we can actually hang on to that and swing it. Okay, so what is appearing to set up now, I grabbed the zigzag for an ABC for a zigzag, but actually what I think it would be is going to end up being W, X, Y setting up. So instead of just being a 3 to, well, it was a 3 to C, it's always a 3 or a C. Whenever we are setting those up, I always like to define that and say that. We had a C to this side. So what that sets us up for is that we finished a pattern to this area, a corrective to the upside, meaning that this should be a corrective then to the downside to follow. We would not expect to get expansive or, impulsive to the downside, finishing on a corrective to the high. Same principles I talked about in this move last week, where we had this three wave to the high. Not quite as, let's say, strong conviction with that as we were with this one, or as with this today as we were with the one from last week that I'm circling. However, it's still setting up very nicely. Still feel very good about it. So if it's going to be a WXY, that would put us with a zigzag. I guess it would be actually BC. And then on this end, we are putting in another zigzag now, potentially to the downside. But we need to finish. It doesn't appear that we have yet finished in my view, which works out because markets were closed today. That's why this outlook is coming out a day later, because markets will open tomorrow. We have had out of U.S. trading, and that's where we saw this gap down, and we've seen this weakness, which always makes me sort of feel good about flipping to the other side. If the rest of the world is doing something different, a lot of the time, especially if it's counter trend, a lot of the time when U.S. markets come back online, they can reverse that. So, we opened up here. This was the Sunday Asia Open. So this has just sort of been meandering since yesterday. We're on the hourly chart here. We're going to go back to the line just because it looks nice. So we'll probably call this A, B, C over here as well. We'll just chuck that on there. So, especially in this market, like more than almost any other, you see it in Bitcoin, you see it in all markets. But what happens is when it starts exhibiting a specific trait for a period of time, it has, I always like to say you have to know your market, right? You can pick up and apply to any, chart the things that you learn here. But if you really know the traits of your market and sort of be able to keep your finger on the pulse of that market, you could pick things up. So in this market, we're picking up here is that we're seeing not truncated, but short C waves. Now, we've had a nice big one to the downside here, but just to say that we're not going to feel, typically, maybe might not feel that great about this C to the upside being small relative to the A. It's probably about 618. The length of the A, which means that it's really about the, let's see. Yeah, just a hair under it. But if yep, there you go. So that's about the second most common relationship for a C wave. So it's not that small, right? But we see that already over here. It gives us a little bit of a finger on the pulse of this market that it's doing that. So that gives us more conviction in this idea, and that we do have another C to the downside. And just like last week, if we zoomed in here, you would want to see probably, we'll do it in a second, but basically this week, I don't yet feel, maybe folks would want to, and again, I say this all the time, getting in around a 3 low or, is never that bad, or getting out on a 3 high if you're long biased. But in this case, I think we're probably putting in a 4. Maybe this is even the B of the 4 or A of the 4, B, C, and then, down, test again, back up, and 4 comes down. Or maybe this is the entirety of the 4 right into the area of the wave 4 of 1 lesser degree. Would be very nifty to come right down to this GP, and then we could come over here and slide to former resistance or support. Find that perfectly lines up as a nice piece of confluence, and we could even drag this support line further. And I mentioned last week how I didn't remember what I had drawn this dotted line for, but I thought that it would be relevant. As we see, it has proven to be so. Although here it would look like a nice little slice below it on divergence, because we have yet to see that on this move to the downside, would be nice and potentially needed to give us the oomph we need to get to the upside. We didn't, here we see how we sort of truncated this C wave. That just never makes me feel great about the ability to sustain to the upside, that whenever this feels unresolved, right? Here, we're sort of resolving. If we could resolve right into the area, we're close to the area now, but another leg down would really feel good about that. Get into the meat of all of this support here, the support zone, and then we can take off for a rather bullish Q1. So we'll see how that goes. We'll keep an eye on this, but filling longs out of that this week. Last week it was out of this low. This week's out of this low. And again, I'm drawing this up here. That's potentially where it would be, but really we're just going to focus on this reaction and then see where it takes us. We don't want to get left. If we come in here and we catch resistance and it's not going to hold, you don't want to. Everybody's trading this differently, but just know these are weekly outlooks. All right, let's get into Bitcoin. All right, digging here into Bitcoin. So last week, we were looking for a break out of this channel to be a potential short opportunity to the downside. However, as we talked about, this channel has shown to be significant once again, except for this time we broke it to the upside just a little bit more than the previous time. Now you're seeing a bit of what I had left on the chart from an update for the members this week, where I outlined, except for you're not seeing most of it, but I outlined that we have now seen 5 swings off of this low, which means that we have not shown a finished corrective to the upside. So, and this was highlighting for them at the time that this was, I don't remember if it was peaking or about to peak, but basically that, it's probably just out. It was probably just back into the channel that, don't fret. We're going to retrace. It should not necessarily hold. However, what we're going to see is the potential for something very bullish. But let me get into that. If this is not a finished corrective, it doesn't mean that we can't go up for another swing, right? Just because basics of Elliott wave here, a corrective wave is never 5 waves. So it very well could be a C to the upside. It could be that. So we will leave that on the table, but it could also be a potential 1-2-1-2, meaning that this, we've had this as a diagonal to the upside, right? We'll just We'll just draw it with the polyline tool, and we'll change the color here in a second. This is, we don't personally love to show leading diagonals until after the fact, but I think we can say with a fair bit of certainty that this was, at this point now that we've gone so far, we only got those 5 swings leading diagonal. Now we have 5 swings. So is this a C, or is it an unfinished corrective, meaning we could have a 5, 3, 3, 5 or something to go to the upside? You wouldn't typically expect something to get so drawn out after a diagonal. You would expect a swift, sharp, deep retracement, which we have gotten. However, the move off of it has not really been the oomph that one might expect. However, we put in another diagonal that could sort of be loading and coiling that spring for a potential another 1, 2, 1, 2. Or we've just finished a corrective to the upside to set us up for that low that we've been waiting for. So in either instance, we shouldn't fret too much because it looks like we could potentially have that resolution we want. So if in a diagonal, this would be, you would have to say an expanding diagonal. You want 3 to be longer than 1. It is. And then you need 5 to be longer than 3. It is ever just slightly. So then you would draw the expanding trend lines, and they must be expanding. Sometimes you get the right measurements and the trend lines don't do what they're supposed to. In this instance, they do. And then, of course, you would expect a corrective wave to the downside to break the bottom channel to be considered an adequate 2 or B wave. So this was always going to come down. The question is it a C or a second 1, 2? And I always like to say to the members that a leading diagonal will beat you up and take your lunch money. And this could potentially be setting you up for a double leading diagonal, one being an expanding leading diagonal, which really sets you up to get your lunch money taken on the long side. So I would have to say, at principle, I would have to expect still that we are looking at a corrective finished to the upside. Let's see if we can draw some, let's go up a time frame just to 4 hours. Check our Fibonacci's from major pools. Just below the 50 on this pool. Let's see. Hold on, we got to get rid of this ad. Video ended. Back to the middle. Golden grooves on YouTube. Let's go, baby. All right. So back to this. Here we go. So just below the 50. Golden pocket of this pull. Downside target this low, which is where we had sort of been previously. So really nothing changing in that regard. If the low isn't in, sort of where we've been targeting from back here. And it's the feel good level to really turn around. But in the meantime, let's dig in and see, are we impulsive or corrective off the high? So let's go back down to 15 minutes to really see what we think. And this looks like a 5 wave there. So all right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Putting it, we could potentially be coming into a 1-to-1 length impulsive wave low, setting up for nice divergence here on the 15-minute, but that doesn't mean a ton. Let's go 45. Still setting up very nice divergence. Let's go to the 1. Same thing. So we're setting up for a really nice divergence on a 1-to-1. Let's draw the corrective channel. So sort of like ES, this thing could potentially, that's kind of funky. Let's put a pitchfork on that. Yeah. Yeah. I like this. Straight through, touch and go. So this is actually, while I am inclined to, at principle, say that the expectation should be this. This is setting up as a potential 3-wave. We're going to, just like last week, you don't get overzealous. You need to wait until you strongly break to the downside of the bottom channel, and not this bottom channel. I mean this bottom channel, still the corrective channel that has been holding us together, right? We've had also this low side for that channel has also been holding us together. So if we do break this, I do suspect we probably get out here. So yeah, if this doesn't turn around here and we come down and then find support at the 1618, that then instead turns to more of a 1, 2, 3 impulsive type of relationship, to where we could begin that move to get us, if that's gonna, let's put this on for you. And then just 2, 3, 4, 5, something like that, right? Setting you up for that. So what we're gonna want to see is this, just sort of like the ES, that we're going to want to turn around after another little wave down. Bitcoin is sort of in the same spot. If we get back in here, clean up, we're going to want to see this just come down to here, touch this bottom, and then respect it at the 1-to-1. A breakthrough insinuates that we're in for something more. And the nature of this setup here, that the first wave here is very not very steep, and then this next wave is more steep, is setting up as a potential for a sort of third in play. That's what you would expect. So we're gonna have to keep our head on a swivel. I think there's definitely potential opportunity right in this area if you see all of the stars align for what you like in a short-term trade. Again, the ES is probably gonna, for me, would play a guiding factor in that as a potential to at least take a swing here and see where you go. Knife right through, she's done. And we're on for the targets that we talked about most likely. Of course, we're still going to have to get below some branches of the tree on the way down. All right, let's talk about Ripple. XRP, everybody's favorite. This thing is one of the hardest charts for me to track. So I typically don't keep an eye on it, but it's just very, I know that a lot of people are interested in it, so that's why I'm doing it, man of the people. And oftentimes on charts like this, you might see me put it into line so that I can sort of hone out the noise and sort of focus on the signal. And we can do that here, but I think that there's some value in this chart on looking at it in candles, because what we can see is that, let's just flip it to log. What does that do to us? Okay, good. All right, so we can see 5 waves off this low. This is actually a 3, and then maybe putting in some sort of a C. So there's a world in which we have a count that, let's just say this is a C and finished, or that we ignore it and that we're putting in the last leg of the C. But either way, I don't feel that bad about Ripple. So since we're in line now, we'll just talk about it. We'll just say 3, 3, 5 stands out. And that's the thing about Ripple, is why I don't typically chart it, because counts don't generally stand out on it. But if we see, we have 1, 2, 3, A, or W, X, 1, 2, 3, Y. And we'll make this tiny. All right, and then same thing here. I mean, this stands out plain as day, however you want to call it. Maybe you want to put this as a flat here. Doesn't matter to me. And then this looks like it's playing out sort of like an impulsive wave. 1, 2, 3, 4, coming down to the 5, almost just like, Bitcoin and ES, right? Put down to micro. Okay, so that is this sort of potential, and then we're in log. Let's just pull from that high, like that 50, get back to candles. Yeah, puts that 50 there. Yeah, I really like the potential for what could happen at this 50. Now that we're in this view, let's go ahead and delete what we drew and think about if this were, say, let's just say, noise, 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 big move to the high, and then A, B, C to the downside. 1, putting in a 2. right? So let's just go through that again. Just call this rough. Again, XRP. Say that you could call that 1 or even A, B, C, 2, or B. And then, yeah, I mean, we could pull this, but yeah, right to the GP and a big reversal right through it after it. But then if this is a 1, 2, or A, B even, then we can draw from here, and we'd be looking for potentially the same area that we were just in. Let me see. Take that out of log, moves that 50 up because we're on a lower time scale anyway, less price difference, probably the better view. So we'll just actually take it fully out of log. And in that instance, we could do 1, 2, setting up for, so if this is 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, A, B, seems like it's actually, I'm drawing that wrong. It would actually probably already be in the 3 of the, 3 of the C. To have the right tool, yes. Something like this. Go to the upside. And you know what's kind of cool is Monte Crypto in our group, former partner, but branched out doing other things, but still around every day. He has this thing he calls the Monty Fifth, which I used to like kind of laugh at, like, all right, well, you could just, it's part of Elliott Wave. But what you really see is when you get these like wicks down, then you get sort of price just hasn't, you got it in price, but you hadn't had it in time. Price likes to grind down sort of deeply on that, not create a new low, and then retrace to the upside. And in fact, he has this little MZ thing he calls where he likes it down to there. But the way this is setting up, I personally like it to GP a little better. Let's see. Yeah, 1 to 1's just above that. So I like it. I like it to the GP. But anyway, you haven't paid in time. So now you're paying in time so that you can turn around and be quite bullish to the upside. I actually like the way this chart looks. As much as this sort of stuff throws people off, I kind of dig it. XRP. I hate buying XRP, but maybe Toot will buy some XRP and talk about it more for you guys. I usually like to talk about things I own. I don't always talk about things I own, but those are my favorite things to talk about. All right, boys. Let's get on to copper. Holy, look at this chart. Oh, that's silver on top of copper. So the dark blue line here, we'll change. Actually, can we just do this? Let's just change that to orange to make it stand out. So the orange line is copper. Should have made the other one orange. The orange line is silver. The blue line is copper. And there's some interesting conversation in the Discord this week I saw, didn't jump into just yet, that, or actually I did a little bit, but that, is copper going to do what Bitcoin has done? And if we look at the copper silver, what silver has done, if we look at the copper silver price and the history of them, they track very closely. I mean, silver has essentially become an industrial metal for the most part. So they, it's not very different than copper. However, what we see is that silver is clearly just decided to go nutsos. So what does that mean? Does that mean that that copper is going to catch up? Does that mean that copper is going to stay low and that these two prices typically rubber band back together? Does silver come crashing to earth? I don't know. I think it's an interesting chart, and this is a weekly outlook, so it's not really, we're on the 3-day chart. It's not really something to think about in the 3-day time frame. For me, let's just get silver off here. For me, multi-pivot divergence, just like, I would not personally have been buying silver above 70, personally. Selling. I have a bunch. I've sold. Looking to sell a bunch more and keep a bunch still. But yeah, if I had to take a guess out of those two outcomes, just maybe I'm feeling a little pessimistic today, but if I had to take a guess on those two outcomes, I would think that silver comes back to the neighborhood of copper, as opposed to copper catching up to silver. Of course, there's a lot of shortages and things like that in the silver world. And it does have the, silver short and all of that. But usually when those things run their course, it goes back to its natural, it regresses to the mean, per se. So I think that this is actually a good sign of silver's mean. And I won't get too much more into it than that, other than could copper go nuts? Maybe. But I do believe these two charts will be close together, at least in their gains area. They will regress to the mean. Whether that means copper catches up or silver comes down, you be the judge. Pessimistically, I think that copper is probably more accurate in price right now than silver, and that silver will come back to the mean. All right, boys, that's it for the outlook this week. Let's see what we can do. Looking for a few different charts now. One more little stab low on divergence as a long opportunity for the week, and maybe at this point, a swing. Let's see. Dude out.